Contensis 15.4 webinar. For those of you who've not met me before, I'm Richard Saunders. I'm the Contensis product owner, and I work really closely with Simon Horan and Richard Chivers to set the roadmap for Contensis. So I want to kick off today with the introduction of blocks, our new feature built to help you ship every day without delay. Blocks is one of the most significant changes to Contensis since content types and entries was introduced in Contensis 9. So what is blocks? Blocks is a deployment platform for managing and delivering websites and their associated services. Blocks allow agile teams to test and deliver iterative site improvements in a modern way, and it enables developers to choose the language or the framework that's most appropriate for the project. And that doesn't have to be a single language or framework. Websites built with blocks can use a mixture of technologies to provide the best experience for your site visitors. And it also means it can work with the different teams that you may have working on your site. And also it hands over the ownership to site owners to decide when code changes go live through a familiar single interface. So, blocks. How does it all fit together? How does this new deployment platform sit alongside content types and entries? How is it all connected? Well, it combines the best elements of a headless CMS and a modern delivery platform, but in an interface that you'll recognize and you already have a log on for. So that's split up into 4 parts. We have entries, all delivered through content modeling and structured content with our content type builder. And this makes it really easy for authors to just focus on creating content. We have site view, a way to define your URL structure for your site, where entries should be served from, where content should exist on your site. And that is paired with 2 new features, renderers. Basically, a renderer is the bridge between your site view structure and what block will be displayed on your site. And blocks. Blocks represent packages of code to deliver an entire site, maybe some associated services, or a very specific feature on your site in a different technology or the same technology, but just handled individually. So let's take a look at the interface, at the normal Contensis interface, and run through some of those features just to hold this all together, to give you the foundation before we dig in further. So let's head over to Contensis. So here we are in our CMS Leaf. This is our sort of test project used for demonstrating purposes. And here you can see a first example of entries using the new views feature that we released in Contensis 15.3. So I've got some well-modeled content in the form of products, pots, and plants. I've got some generic content pages, things like about us, terms and conditions, as well as landing pages and home pages. And I've got some well-defined structured content around people that might be associated with blog posts or people as part of the organization. So that's entries. Then we have site view. Site view enables you to create the structure of how your URL structure should be defined. And it's from this site view structure that you'll attach entries or have entries automatically populated in the site view tree based on the type of content that they are. So now we've got site view and entries. How do these things connect to blocks? How does a blog post, 5 ways to keep your plants happy this winter, get rendered out in the way that it does on the front end site? What is the bridge between site view and a block of code? Well, and what makes that decision of what block should be displayed? I mentioned that a website could be made up of a single block for your entire website, maybe using one big mono repo, or individual parts of your site can be created with smaller blocks, maybe written in a different language. Well, we use something called renderers. And if you were to look at the homepage of this site, and we look at node properties now, you'll see in the node properties, we have this renderer feature that it says, if anybody comes to the website or any partial URL that matches when they type it in their web browser, use the renderer called Leaf website. So where these renders are defined and how does that renderer connect to a block? Well, if you head over into the settings menu, if you've got the appropriate permission through the roles builder, you'll see this option for renderers. And renderers lists out all the different types of renderers that are configured for this project. In this case, here we've got the Leaf website renderer. And when we click on that, it basically gives us a name. It also tells us what block this is associated with. In this case, it's the Leaf website block. And this is currently assigned to every type of content in Contensis for this project. So given anybody comes to the site, we saw that this renderer was applied to the root node. And at this point, this Leaf website block will take over and determine how that content should be displayed. However, we can be more granular than that. So this Leaf website block is written in React, and we can show you that afterwards. But I want to introduce maybe a new blog record page that's written in .NET. This is where we can introduce a mixture of technologies. Maybe somebody else has built your site in React and your team is familiar with .NET and you want to work on a new section of your site using a language that you're familiar with. So if we go back to renderers, we can see we got this blogs renderer. And this blogs renderer basically says, if I'm a blog post content type, then use this. Use the Leaf blogs renderer. Use the Leaf's blogs block. And this is where we're going to begin to dig in from the developer experience shortly on how that block and how that renderer ends up in Contensis and is configured. So let's head back over to entries. We'll go over to Keynote and touch on what it looks like now from the developer experience. As I mentioned, we're going to take a look on how the Leaf blogs block got there in Contensis, how it is defined. And it's basically takes a number of steps. So the developer will be familiar with building code, running code locally, and committing that to source control, whether that's GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, whatever source control that you're used to using. Once that code has been committed, a continuous integration step takes place and packages that code ready for deployment, ready to run in a modern delivery platform. And that could be run through GitHub Actions or GitLab. And once that build process has taken place, a command at the end of that sequence says, I want to push this block of code, this package code, over to Contensis as a block. And once it's in Contensis, that block becomes ready to preview the content, those blog posts, at that URL. So I want to demonstrate how this works. So I'm going to kick off by running a project locally. I'm going to edit and commit some small code changes. And we're going to quickly see how continuous integration fires that, packages that code, how it then pushes that packaged code as a block to Contensis. And we can see some other features from the developer's perspective within the Contensis interface once it's been received there. So without further ado, let's dig into blocks. Just make sure that's ready for the next section. And we'll head over to my environment, which I've already set up. So for those of you who aren't developers, in my right-hand pane, I have a code editor, Visual Studio Code. on the left-hand side of my screen, I have a web browser that's showing what that local code is actually generating. So it's generating this blog record page, and the code in the right-hand side is determining what content is displayed. Now, this is actually pulling content from Contensis, from that Leaf project. It's pulling a blog post directly from there and all its associated content. If you want to see a little bit more detail, if the devs in this sort of room today want to kind of dig in a little bit more, you can go and see this Razor page Leaf example on GitHub. So if you head over to github.com/Contensis, you'll see this Razor page Leaf example and all the codes there for you to see. But in summary, I'm going to introduce a new image here in this right hand to the right of this title. And so that's this code that I've just commented out. So when I use the right keyboard shortcut, I can uncomment that. And when I hit save now, my local development environment hot reloads that change. And you can see from Contensis now, I'm pulling down the image, the primary image for this blog post to be displayed. So that's cool. I've made a small code change. And what I want to do now is I want to commit that code, commit that change, because maybe in my sprint this week, I've been asked to, can we improve the visual appearance of a blog post? Can we introduce the primary image as one of my tasks? So this is one of my tasks, to introduce that image. And I want to make it available for the rest of the team to review, preview, check it's all okay, maybe check across different devices that it renders correctly, and going through your normal kind of sort of quality assurance process. So let's commit that code. So we've got this code change. And I'm going to say it's a change, and I've added the blog record image. So let's commit that. See what changes. So at this point, if I go over to GitHub, just do a quick refresh, we'll see my change coming in. So yeah, 17, 18 seconds ago, I added the blog record image. And what that's done now, it's kicked off a continuous integration build, and we're using GitHub Actions here. And if I go to GitHub Actions, we can see that the build process that needs to take place has been started. And it's building a Docker image. And once it's, I'm going to go to the summary so we can see all the steps. It's building that Docker image, and now it's about to push that image over to Contensis as a block. For the curious amongst you, you might want to understand how that's defined, how that block is defined. You'll see it in the build YAML file here for the GitHub workflow. And it's defined here by this command push block with its configuration, what CMS it should go to. And we're actually using GitHub client IDs and shared secrets here to read it from our GitHub repo that's private to us. So that stuff doesn't ever get kind of committed to code. So that process has kicked off now. That code has been built, and it's now being pushed as a block over to Contensis. So let's have a look in Contensis. And here we are. You'll notice here on the left-hand side, we've got a new blocks icon. And this brings us to, if you would just click that icon, you'll see those three new blocks, or the three blocks that existed, had renderers associated with them. Now, those renderers are actually automatically created for you. When you push your first block, a renderer will be built in the background, ready for you to assign to a site view node, as you saw earlier. This has all been pre-configured prior to this call today. So we've got Leaf blogs. Let's dig into that a little bit more. So in the block version screen, we see every commit a developer has made. So every change that's gone in and has been committed to the repository that's built a version of that block has been made available in this block version screen. And you can see some history. And you can see that we've tested this demo lots of times because you can see the same changes in the commit messages here. This is great. You might want to understand what change has taken place. We've actually set up blocks to work with GitHub, Bitbucket, GitLab. And so we actually use some of their APIs to give a little bit more information. So if you looked at this commit change from before, it'll bring up GitHub, bring up its comparison view. You can actually see the code change if you're interested in what took place, which is really nice. You haven't got to kind of dig around in GitHub to find it. We just link back to it. Also, you can find out if you're kind of wanting to understand, maybe you've committed this block of code and something hasn't kind of worked out as you expected it to, or seems to be causing an error. You can head over to console logs and dig into your console logs for that container, things you probably would have had to ring and speak to someone in support to find out about previously. So we've surfaced all that console log data here for you to dig into. And there's a little bit more detail about who did it and what the commit messages was and so on and so forth. So right now, here's my new change that I just made, version 17. And this version isn't live yet. I've got version 16 without the blog record on the screen. So if this is my local, if I head over to live Leaf, in fact, let's just preview this block a minute. Go to the live site. I'm no good at remembering URLs. So if we go to our blog posts at the moment, and I look here, so this is my live site, and my live site is currently using version 16 of the block. That's the one that's live, and I haven't got a blog post image on there. So let's halt there for a second. So as a developer, I can work locally. I can commit my code to any kind of source control. From there, that source control will kick off a continuous integration build with the CI platform of your choice. As said, we support GitHub Actions, and we've got those available on the GitHub Marketplace in order to push blocks. And they're also working in GitLab as well. Once we release blocks, we'll provide these configurations for you to kind of get you started building these blocks yourselves. And once that block has been built, it gets pushed to Contensis and made available here for you to see all those changes in one place, all down to users who have Contensis access and are given permission through the roles builder. So that's the dev side. So let's head back over to Keynote and touch on what's next. So I mentioned it's a combination of the developer experience, but also your kind of site owners and agile teams who are working with your site and maybe working on a new site section or a new tool within your application. And you want to kind of review that stuff together. You want to review code changes in one place. You want to check that the code that you've deployed works on various devices. So what tooling is there for you? Well, we've introduced a new preview toolbar. So when you view the content, you're going to get a toolbar displayed that allows you to switch between different blocks. So you can compare changes with the before and after. So before your developer made the change just now, what did it look like before? What does it look like with that change? Maybe you're doing a combination of changes, which are code changes and content changes, and you want to see maybe some recent content changes you've made that are not live yet, alongside maybe a new feature like the blog post that we just saw? What does it look like with a different image rendered in that new block? We want to make it really easy for you to kind of quickly edit the content that you're seeing in preview. So you've got this preview URL you're going to. You don't want to go back over to the CMS, go to entries, search for the particular entry that's attached to that site view node, find it. So we wanted a quick way of you to be able to edit that content. And we wanted it to be really easy to share that URL and that preview with all the block configuration and content configuration that you set up with others, so they can review it and go, yeah, that's all good. You can make it live from my perspective. It works on my iPad. It works in my different desktop environments. Content looks great. Whoever's involved in your team to go, yeah, let's make that live. So let's take a look at the CMS now from the perspective of a site owner and your agile team. So let's head back over to the CMS. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to change over to a different browser. Just going to duplicate this tab, so I'm set up for later. And let's go back to the block screen. Okay, let's go to this Leaf blog. So remember, I showed you the live site just now, and that live site didn't have the image in place. So as a site owner, I can preview. I can go and find that page. So I'll go to blog, and I can see that at the moment, my current block, my current live block doesn't have a blog post here. Just going to log into this new toolbar. Because we're on the preview URL now, you'll notice we've introduced this floating toolbar, and I'm going to log in. And password's too long to type. Okay, so we've got this really nice toolbar that you can place wherever you want, because we don't know what content you're displaying on your site. So you can kind of put it in 6 different regions. And when we click on blocks, we now get a list of the blocks that we saw over in the Contensis interface. And we're particularly looking at the Leaf blogs, so this new kind of blog post. And we're currently viewing what is live on production. So we saw on our live URL just now that there was no blog record image. But if I want to preview the site now, with that change that I just made, I can click on that block, click on play, my browser will refresh, and it's now using that completely separate block, which is running in its own container, and it's displaying the content with the code change that I've made. So you can see now that as a site owner, you can review a code change from someone, see it rendering with real live content from your CMS without just testing things locally. So you can get a real understanding of your site changes going on. Now, I think this is good, but I might want to look at this kind of render now that I'm displaying, maybe with a different image. So to do that, we can just click on this open entry button. This blog post will open up. And I've already changed the image, and the preview is showing me my published content. So this preview URL is showing the content that is currently published. And I've already made the change. So if I want to see this content, I can simply now change the content version to the latest content. And I can see that new block rendering in a completely separate container with content coming from latest. And now I can see, right, yeah, I'm good. And if this was like a landing page made up of lots of rows of content, you could kind of swap and change content around, make sure your block's doing everything that it should be. and you're confident and you're happy with that change, well, you can go ahead and publish this now. Now, should have given this alt text, so I'm just going to say a lady potting a plant surrounding with compost. So if I save that change and I publish that entry, if I change this now to the published content, shouldn't see anything change because actually that entry has just been updated. So I'm now seeing that published content. And if I'm confident that this code is good and everything has gone well, I can head back over to the blocks version screen and say, I'm happy, let's make this change live to everyone else. So we'd hit the make live button. But I've just realized I forgot to send it to our accessibility team to review that page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the preview URL, and we've introduced this other little button called share. And what share does, gives you a little nice QR code. You can copy the link and share that way. But if you've got a device in front of you that you just want to quickly test with, open up the camera, scan the QR code, and that will open up the same web page using the same blocks configuration that I'm previewing, the same content preview that I'm displaying, and render it on that device quickly for me to kind of validate everything is good and everyone is happy. If everyone's happy, go to block versions and we can make this live. Are you sure? It's immediate. All web traffic now will be driven to that block. As you'll see, block's been made live. This other one will be stopped, no longer made live. And if I go to my live site now, I've got a new blog post displayed with new content using a .NET deployed block when the rest of the site is using React. And that's all built using blocks, renderers, and our new deployment platform. So that was blocks. In a nutshell, we know it's going to really aid the process of building complex sites with many different integrations, many different site sections that have different behavior, might be run and managed by different teams, and bringing that all into one place, into the Contensis interface for you to manage and decide when that content should be released. There's many more features to show. We're going to be releasing in the new year, and we're going to do a deeper dive into some of the extra features in the blocks feature in 2023. So hopefully that's whetted your appetite for blocks. And we're creating a load of video content and blog content on this stuff. So keep your eyes peeled. We're really excited by the blocks feature. So what's next? Just take a glass of water because that was a long demo. One of the features that we've had for a little while but hasn't been in the Contensis interface is the ability to create reverse proxies. These have been available in the SaaS dashboard and hasn't been the familiar interface that you're used to in Contensis. So we brought over proxies into Contensis itself. Again, single login, permissionable to your users using roles. And let's just dig into what on earth is a proxy, or a reverse proxy for those who don't know. Basically, it allows an organization to direct its visitors to one or more website instances while making them appear as though they're on the same domain. So what could that look like? It could be that you started building your site in content types and entries, but you still want to serve content that exists maybe with a legacy provider and look as though it's all coming from the same URL. It could be that you're running an e-commerce shop on a different platform, maybe something like Shopify, and you want to make your shop look as though it's running off the same domain as the rest of your website. Using a reverse proxy enables you to do that. But as we were doing proxies and as we've been doing blocks, we wanted to make it easy for our customers who are on Contensis Classic today who are beginning to dip their toes into content types and entries and make that process so much easier to migrate from classic into content types and entries. And one of the things that you can do now is, if your site is built using blocks, you can continue serving content from Contensis Classic, and we'll do all the routing for you automatically. And I'll demonstrate that shortly. And we also offer default support for reverse proxy to be able to do exactly as I said earlier, be able to kind of route your domain over to a Shopify store or a legacy system where content may exist. So let's take a look at proxies, and then we'll go through a bunch of other content focused features. So back to the CMS. From the settings menu, again, if you've been given permission through roles, you'll see a new proxies section. And this enables us to say, right, let me open up another tab for you. Let's look at site view. So here I am in site view for Leaf. I don't currently have a news section in my Leaf website within content types and entries, but maybe I had an old WordPress site that had all my news for Leaf that I kind of wanted to point everyone to. So at the moment, if you went to leaf.cloud.contensis.com/news, there's no content in sort of content types and entries to display it. So what we can do is we can say, let's create a reverse proxy. And I'm using the BBC as an example here, but to say, if somebody comes to contensis.com or leaf.com/news, redirect that traffic to bbc.co.uk where the URL matches /news. And you can see here, I've set it to say, when you go to the news node, go to this URL. So let's take a look at that. We get a preview URL. Go to news. So straight away, we can see that when I've gone to /news, it's gone to my site view tree and gone, I haven't got any content here, but there is a reverse proxy attached to say, migrate my users over to this new section, which happens to be bbc.co.uk. So that's a reverse proxy. But for those of you who've been kind of having to do lots of work to try and make classic and blocks to work together, if we head over to classic Contensis, this demonstration, you'll see that I've got a classic web page built with classic templates. And I want to be able to view that page, even though my site is built with blocks. Now, when I go to /classic page.aspx, what will actually happen is when I press enter, it will check site view, recognize that there's no classic page, and it will automatically fall back to Contensis classic content that matches that URL. So rather than going through a container, it will fall back and go to IIS to serve that content for you, which is going to make it a really nice, easy migration path using blocks for those of you who are serving content in two places. So that's proxies, and I've got a load more to show you. So yeah, it's a good day today. Okay, I'm going to go through a series of features now, and then my plan is to demonstrate all of those features together at the end, hoping that my memory serves me well to remember each feature that I'm about to go through, because there's quite a few. So we've introduced favorites. So when we introduced views in Contensis 15.3, we had the ability to set those views effectively as your favorites. These are the views that you want to see. We created a new favorites API. And now we've been able to use that same favorites API to start adding favorites to commonly used resources in Contensis. So when you're creating entries, and maybe you've got access to 20 different content types, blog posts, news, courses, whatever they might be, you can favorite your commonly used content types, making it really easy and quick to just select the content type that you need to use. When you're modeling content, if you're a developer and you find yourself you're managing content types or components every day, and you're making tweaks as you're building out your site, you might want some of those content types or components to be surfaced to the top of the list, just saving you a little bit of time from scrolling or searching for the particular resource that you want. And also, if you're a customer who've got lots of projects in your system, you may want to highlight the key projects that you work on a daily basis and surface them at the top of the projects listing. So that's favorites. In the last release, we introduced some new defaults, one of them being default entries. We've now added support for default images. So for example, if you have a blog post and you always use the same feature image every time, you could set a default image to be used as that feature image. So when a new entry is created, that's populated for you automatically. And we've added support for both single and multiple images. So you go into the content type builder, you see here in the bottom right hand corner, we've got a default image set, and that when that blog post is created, that image is automatically populated for the author, saving them maybe a step of content population. We've also introduced a lovely feature called entry thumbnail. And this allows you to visualize content relationships. And it's really nice when you've got image-rich content types that you want to see in the Contensis UI. Again, on a content type, any image field can be set as an image thumbnail, as an entry thumbnail. You basically click a Boolean tick box, and that sets that image as the default thumbnail. So that maybe when you open up an entry picker to choose some products, you see the nice plant pictures next to them. They're also displayed once you've selected those entries. You can see all the curated products you've selected, not just by their title and descriptions, but that visual entity as well. And we've also made it easier on the front end by surfacing entry thumbnail as a default field, like we do with entry title and description, to return that image for you, making listings easier. If you're doing search results that have all got entry thumbnails, you can handle all those in the same way. Site view links in rich text. So those of you who use the rich text area may find that they've created links and you've decided to move something in the site view tree and realize you're getting a 404 on your link in the on your website. And that's because we weren't managing links correctly. With some recent work we've been doing in the content API, in a recent refactor, we've been able to support the addition and surfacing of those site view links and managing them for you. So if you change the node in the site view tree, it will update and index your content appropriately to notify that there's been a change. So no more 404s, which is nice. We've also introduced WebP and SVG upload support, and these are supported in the image gallery, making it easy to select icons or logos or any kind of illustrative vector-based images that you want to see in the image gallery. No longer do you have to kind of copy and paste SVG code into a text box or select it from a drop down and leave it in your code repository. It can all be managed as image and asset content within Contensis. WebP images we've always supported through the image API, so you could always converted a JPEG or a PNG to WebP. We just didn't support the upload of WebP images in the CMS. So this has got its own content type now, and it's handled like other images. We also realized that people are using entries to represent just small strings of text, like tags or categories for a blog post. And utilizing the entry picker and the display of entries can be quite overbearing for just maybe 3 or 4 items in terms of the size that's displayed in the entry editor interface. So we've introduced a tag entry picker, which displays the entries as tags. You can see this room type here. It's just listing kitchen and living room. If we were using the normal entry picker, it would look like this foliage one above. So taking up more space in the interface, making the screen longer for someone to scroll through content to find what they're looking for. And we've also added the ability to create another item when you're publishing or approving an entry. So maybe you're creating a series of events, and you create the first event, you want to publish that event and then create another. Prior to this update, if you'd clicked on publish, you would have been returned to the entry listing screen, where you then have had to create new entry, select event again, create your event population, click publish, and you'd have to go back around that sequence. Now you can click on the drop-down arrow on the right of the publish button or the send for approval button, and it will give you the option to send for approval or publish and create another, keeping you in the entry workflow, speeding up your workflow, and less returns to the entry listing screen. So that's a lot of features. I'm going to try and remember them all. So let's head over to Contensis and look at those in practice. I'm going to close up these old pages. Head over to entries. So let's start with favorites. So if we go to content modeling, and let's go to content types. You can see now that every content type in this list has a star next to it. So we can easily add a content type to my favorites list, and it's returned to the top of the list, which is great because it just means I'm one click away. Whereas if I had to scroll all the way down to maybe tags, that'd be a bit frustrating. So I can add tag easily. And searching for these as well. So let's look for something. We've got blog and blog listing. So let's search for blog. Blog listing and blog post are displayed together, and you can see that they're favorited. So search results combine both favorited and unfavorited content. And these favorites are applied to both content types, components, and also in the entry creation workflow. So if I create a new entry and I commonly create blog posts, you can see I've already favorited blog posts to this list, making it quick and easy access to get to that blog post. Whereas plant would be right down the bottom of this list, and it's actually now in my view straight away to create a new plant. So that's favorites. We've also got it in projects. So this project has only got, this site has only got one project, this instance. So I can't show you it here, but here's the favorite. It does actually add it as a favorite, and I can remove it. So yeah, we do it in projects, content types, components, and through the entry creation flow. Right, entry, let's take a look at default images. So default images, if I go to content types, and let's look at the blog post content type. And I want to say for every new blog post I create, I want the primary image to be a particular image. I want it to be this leaf. So if I click on insert and save that change now, if I create a new blog post now, you'll see that that primary image is automatically populated, and don't need to kind of select another one. If a user doesn't want that one because they've got a particular image they want to use, they can just click on select an image and it just gets replaced. So that's default images, and that works for a gallery of images as well. If you've got it set to multiple, so you could have 5 or 6 images being pre-populated automatically. Next feature is entry thumbnail. So let's take a look at maybe, let's look at a landing page. Let's go to content pages, can't remember what the landing page is. Right, let's look at the home page, find the perfect plant. So I go to the body of this. You can see here now I've got a composer area that's got a component inside it with a promoted product. And you can see we've got this really nice Chinese evergreen plant being displayed now. So I can actually see what the promoted product is. But how do I go about setting those against sort of for those entries? Well, if I go over to Content Type Builder, go to Content Types, I'm going to select person. So I know it's not set on here. We've got a photo of a person, and I want to say, show me this person wherever this entry is picked. So click on use this as an entry thumbnail. And I know that people are currently used in blog posts as authors. So I'm going to go and create a new blog post or edit a blog post and want to see that person's photo next to it. So let's look at this blog post here. So if I scroll down, I'll get to a field which is author. And now we can see that because I've enabled entry thumbnail, that image has come through to Jane Garcia here, which is really nice. But also if I select a person, the entry picker list also shows those images. So it's a really nice alternative way for entry selection, actually seeing the content that you want to select. So yeah, that is entry thumbnail. And as I mentioned in the slide deck earlier, this is returned as an entry thumbnail field in the delivery API as well. So that's entry thumbnails. Tag entry pickers. So let's take a look at that. Best place to look at those are plants. So you can open up a plant. Let's go to my views, go to products, select a plant. So let's look at this Geo mid-size pot. It says using a pot, not a plant. It's looking at the image. Plant. So, okay, variegated snake plant. If I scroll down here now, earlier on today, I added a room entry picker to this content type. And if I select a room that this plant is good in at the moment, it's just using our standard entry picker. And this is where I said it might look a bit odd if you had sort of 10, 15 different kind of rooms it could be displayed in. You'd have a really long list here. So we want to change this entry picker to be an entry tag picker. So I'm going to edit the content type for plants. And I'm going to go and find the room entry picker. I'm going to change its editor type from just being a standard entry picker to an entry tag picker now. Hit save and publish that. So if I was to create a brand new plant now, and I scroll down, you can see the editor's slightly changed into an auto-suggest searchable box now, so I can start typing or selecting, just using the drop-down. So I want corridor, I want living room, I want bedroom, and I want kitchen. So I can add them, hasn't taken off a really long list, hasn't created a really long list. Can quickly scan and read them, and I can also change them and edit them in line as well. Oh, I can give my plant money plant. Let's save that. So yeah, you can carry on editing these things in line or removing them from the list as well. So you haven't lost that functionality. The only thing you lose is the entry thumbnail and the entry description, but it's a sort of an authoring choice really. So that's the tag editor. I just want to show you site view links just to kind of give you what's happening there. So let's look at some content pages. Let's look at the shipping policy. And I will be wrapping up shortly. So if we go to the body area, I can see that in this rich text field, I've got a contact us button, link. And if I edit that link, I can see that that link is being served from /about/contact. Now, so a developer on the front end would get back from the API I'm going to zoom in a minute so you can actually see. If I scroll down here, we can find, let's just do contact. You can see here, there's the HTML tag. We've got the A tag, title of contact, and the href is /about/contact. Now, if I go and move this entry in site view, so it's the shipping policy, and I'm linking to the contact us page. If I move the contact us page to the root of the site now, what we want to see is that response on the delivery end to change from /about/contact to just /contact. So if I refresh, he says, was he too fast and too eager? Can't even see it. Yeah, you can see now that that content has been reindexed and has gone through, and now it's /contact. So you can have confidence now that links within rich text areas are now managed and get returned in the delivery API as they should do, preventing you getting from 404s. I've got one last feature, which was creating content in a flow from memory. So let's go and create some new rooms that I applied to my plants earlier. So I'm going to create a new room. And I know I haven't got a study in my list at the moment, so I'm going to add a study. So I'm going to save. Now, if I hit publish, it's going to take me back to the entries listing screen, which is not what I want. But if I click the drop down now, I can click on publish and create another, I don't know, plants for your basement. And again, I can click save, and I can keep on going through this process. So it makes simplicity of kind of recreation of the same or similar content in a sequence nice and easily. So if I get my summary right, we should have covered all those features. So as a quick recap, I got blocks enabling you to ship every day without delay, giving site owners oversight of agile website delivery. Proxies, aiding migration from Contensis Classic or from a legacy system, or serving content on another URL that you don't maybe not have control of. The ability to create favorites in the creation of content flow in the content modeling screen, or when you've got many projects. The ability to set default images, to set entry thumbnails in images and see those in entry pickers and entry display to really visualize those content relationships. Manage links within rich text fields when you move them in site view. The ability to upload SVG and WebP support. Didn't show you that. My memory's not that good. The tag entry picker. The improvements to entry workflow. But I will show you SVGs just very quickly, because it's just a nice change. So let's create a entry. I've actually got some called growing conditions. And previously, your developers might have set something like this up, an icon picker, which is basically a list of icons that exist in a code repository that result in when I click on that plus sign, a plus sign would be output on the front end code. But it's not very visual, it's not very nice, you can't see it. But if I go to select image now, the image gallery will now display icons, that same icon pack, and I can choose them and insert them into my content type. And the other advantage of these SVGs is they are also displayed in the entry listing. So if I quickly filter my content type to growing conditions, and I turn on the image field, growing conditions, I turn on icon, and hit save. Those SVGs are all nicely rendered within the entry listing as well. So that's SVG support. And the same applies for WebP. I haven't got any WebP images on my machine at the moment, but they work the same as JPEG and PNG uploads and display in the image gallery in exactly the same way. So, as usual, if you've got any questions, join the Slack community to ask any kind of questions and carry on the conversation.